back, he's back, he's back, everybody, I can't believe it, he's back. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. I really apologize for not posting anything in the past 5 months, and sorry about the clown just now, I just had to do it. Okay, so in this video I want to give you 7 tips when you're learning React, and I've organized these tips to map out to your learning journey with React, so hopefully it will be helpful. Let's do it. Okay, so tip number 1 is actually learn JavaScript first. I know this one, everybody talks about it. I honestly haven't done it, and I can say with confidently that you should. So when I say learn JavaScript first, what I mean is not only learn the language, but learn how to manipulate DOM elements with JavaScript. The thing is, React is a JavaScript framework that is built on JavaScript. And most of the time, you will find yourself writing normal JavaScript statements. So you need to be good with JavaScript. Not only that, you need to be also good with manipulating the DOM with JavaScript so that when you start using React, you actually understand what React is doing, what React is helping you with. So what I would say is learn JavaScript in general as a language. Make sure that you know how to fetch data from APIs, render it to a DOM element. Make sure that you know how to do normal or basic DOM manipulation in React. In JavaScript. Make sure that you know how to do async await. Make sure how to do try and catch statements. All of these things, once you know how to do them and you know the basics of them in JavaScript, moving on to React will be far more easier. Tip number 2 is learn what problem React is actually trying to solve for you. This might sound weird, but many times you're actually confused of what React does. So you think React is doing like everything for you on the front end, which is actually not very true. So React is an abstraction on top of JavaScript that makes handling interactivity in the browser easier. That's it. So that's what React is doing for you. Many times you'll be fetching stuff and rendering data with React, but all the fetching and all the error handling will actually happen with normal JavaScript. And it's important to understand this because if you don't, you'll find yourself doing something like error handling in React, or maybe like, I don't know, data fetching in React, which is correct. There is a specific way to do it in React, but you're actually doing normal data fetching, which if you have done the tip number 1, which is learn JavaScript, you find much easier. You find it much easier to do that in React. So you need to know what problem is React is trying to solve for me, which is basically handling interactivity in the browser. So handling states, handling taking inputs from the user, and doing some requests to the server, getting new data and rendering it again, stuff like this. And it's an abstraction on top of JavaScript that makes your code more clear and more consistent and gives you tools to work with, how to handle the global state of an app, how to fetch data before you show anything to the user, and so on. That's it. That's what React is trying to help you with. And it's important to have this mindset before you move forward. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, start with React documentations. Okay, so many times people will be asking things like, okay, what's the best course? Where should I start? I want to learn React. I don't know what to do, and so on. And what I did was basically just go to React website and just go through the documentation and just go through it. Listen, there will be no way to learn about something but to actually ask the person who did it and just read what the person is trying to say about it. And when you read through the documentation, they will explain things like, okay, why we moved to hooks, or why we made hooks, and what is use effect, and how it renders, and how does React handles the DOM, and things like what is a ref, and how React decides what to re-render and what not to re-render. Not all the courses will actually go into the details of how React works. But the documentation has a very nice flow of information that you can see how the people who made React actually think. I think there's one section there that says like, okay, here's an example of how you think in React, which is very, very good. He goes up and say, okay, here's the normal UI that we're trying to make, but here's how we are going to compose this UI in components, and here's how the state is gonna flow like, and so on. So it's very, very good resource for you to start learning. So my point is, just go to the documentation, read through it, go through the simple tutorials there, and try to understand the philosophy behind React more than the implementation, because the implementation is everywhere, but the philosophy is not everywhere. So start with the documentation. Tip number 4, code React from scratch. Okay, I know many people will really hate this, but I think it will be a far better learning experience for you to not go ahead and just go create React app and just get started with React, but it would be better if you start saying, okay, I'm gonna have like an NPM project, and I'm gonna install React into that project, and I'm gonna figure out how to use it, whether you get that from the documentation, whether you get that from a course or whatever. But once you get that idea, you'll understand things like, okay, React is actually injecting stuff into a DOM element called the root. And that understanding, that really basic understanding, is what going to propel your knowledge with React further. Let's be clear, anybody can watch my videos or watch anybody else's videos and just copy the code, and you know what, it will work. But with React, and with many things in web development anyway, and programming, you have to understand how things work in the background, and that will give you the capacity to solve different problems when you face them. So if you want to just copy and paste code, or just follow somebody on the internet and get things to work, go for it. But my tip is, don't do that. Go from scratch, try to understand how things work, and try to do things in a way that will teach you more, that will get the project done. Trust me, when you're working on a project, you want to be able to smash through the problems that you will face. And building that knowledge while you're learning, which is really starts from the bottom down, which is like from the bottom up, sorry. So from the very bottom, what is React doing? What problems it's trying to solve? Things like how does use effect work, and when does it run, and how to make it only run once, and how to make it run on every single render, and what does it depend on, and what's the difference between use effect and use layout effect. Once you figure out these things, it's gonna be way much better for your understanding and for your ability to solve other problems in the future. So that's why I'm saying, start from the scratch. Don't just go with create React app. Figure out how React works on the very basic level. It's gonna be better for your future, 100%. Tip number 5, and this really relates to the tip just now, learn how React works internally. And again, it goes back to the same point I was making just now, which is you need to understand how things work, because that will give you the ability to be better at solving different and genuinely generic problems or original problems when they show up in the future. So what I mean by this, try to understand the answer to questions like, why does React re-render a component? How does React decide when to re-render a component, when not to re-render a component? Why did the React team come up with hooks? How hooks are different from should component update, or the component did mount, and all these other life cycle methods from before? What's the main difference between a class component and a functional component? What's the difference between use layout effect and use effects? If you figure out the answer to these questions, you will understand way more about React. So when you're writing the code, your mastery of the code will increase, and you will know when this will run, and when to write the code to run before render, when to write the code that will run on every render, and where to put your code exactly, and how React is on your side, kind of like helping you to do stuff. More than just you being, oh, why is it rendering too many times? Or why is my code not running in the right direction? Or why am I getting this error? Or why use layout effects is not working on the server? And stuff like this. This frustration, it's not going to be a good experience, but once you start from learning and you start asking these philosophical questions, or these questions that relate to how things actually work in React, you'll be far better off in the future. So learn how React works under the hood. Tip number 6, invest time in learning advanced React pattern. So I've seen this with myself, I've seen this with many other people. When you just work with React, you go like, okay, here's the basic use state stuff, and here's how to use effect and all that stuff, and then you start writing apps and you're making projects and everything. But the thing is, React actually has far better tools that will help you handle big state and big apps, like use reducer or context or custom hooks and so on. So many times, and I've seen this with myself, I don't invest time in actually learning those advanced patterns, but rather it's like, okay, it's working, I know how to use state, I'm writing everything in single state stuff, or maybe sometimes I put them in one object or whatever, but that's not really good. Many times, stop to learn what the native tools that React actually offers for you, especially before you start jumping on saying something, oh, I want to use Redux, or I want to use MobX, or I want to use this library or other library whatsoever. Don't do that. Try to learn advanced React patterns first, so you have big mastery of what React offers for you. And only when you get to the point that you know every single pattern in React, you can decide then that yes, my project needs Redux for these reasons, or my project needs MobX for these reasons. But don't go into these extra libraries without learning the advanced React pattern. And I also see online, like mostly in YouTube, that these advanced React patterns are not always talked about, so I'll be making some videos about them, but try to dig around and try to get really familiar with really advanced React patterns before you go on and implement other state handling libraries or whatever libraries you want to use with React. So yeah, learn advanced React patterns. Tip number 7, and this is actually a bonus. If you're asking where to learn React from, so I have one course for you I personally started with and I personally 100% recommend. And that course is from FrontEndMasters, and I have no affiliations with them. They're just doing a really good job and I want to give them a shout out. So that course is by Brian Holt from Microsoft, and it's called Complete Introduction into React. And it's really good. He will go from the very basic, like I said before, not with Create React App, with simply just explaining how do you use React in a normal NPM project, and how do you integrate later in using JSX, and what do you do to make JSX work, and so on. He'll also explain about custom hooks, and the course progresses very nicely until it goes at the end where you have built a really nice app that's quite complex. So I would really recommend that course, and I will leave a link to it in the video description. That's it, guys. 7 tips to learning React, and I've tried to make them in the sequence of your learning React journey, and I'll give you a bonus at the end, which is the course to start with, or to start, yeah, if you want just a course that will give you everything, just start with that course. Otherwise, learn things on your own, which is what I recommend from the documentation and so on. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it the thumbs up. If you don't like it, the other button works too. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.